I want to ask you this question this morning to kind of set this up. What do you and I do? What do we do with our expectations? Think about expectations, the word expectations and what that means. What do I do with things that I expect? What do I do with my expectations? How do I get focused on my spouse's desires? Everybody say desires. Versus my expectations. What do I do, or how do I get focused on my spouse's desires instead of my expectations? And that's the basis of what we're going to talk about this morning. Now, before I go too far, I know every woman here is like nudging their husband. Oh my goodness, he's talking about relationships. Honey, listen up, take notes. He's talking about relationships, okay? And I've had a number of ladies over the last couple of weeks, as we've been gearing up for these talks on marriage, have been saying to me, wow, marriage, I love it when you talk about marriage, Pastor. I really enjoy the marriage talks. My husband really needs them. But I want to kind of help you ladies understand something. Think about this. Your husband thinks about marriage talks the way that you think about your car. See, you know how women just get in their car and they expect it to work? Right? They don't expect that they have to do anything to keep that car going. You don't expect that there's any maintenance needed for your car. You just think you get in it, you put a little gas in it every so often, and it should go all the time, anytime, wherever you want to go. And so you get in the car, and maybe your husband's driving one day, and your husband is driving your car, and you go, whoa, 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 turn down the radio. And you're like, why? I love this song. I'm all out of love. It's so lost without, right? And he says, no, turn. I hear something. There's a rattling in the car. And you go, no, I drive this car every day. There's no rattling. And your husband says something like this, doesn't he? Honey, when's the last time you got the oil changed? Right? Or when's the last time we got a tune-up on this car? How long has this rattling been going on that you haven't noticed it? And if you're like my wife, and I know you are, most of you, you'll say something like that, well, I didn't think it was really a big deal. I don't want to deal with the rattling. It should just fix itself. Ladies, that's kind of how your husband thinks about marriage. Oh, there's a little rattle here. It's okay. It'll work itself out. It'll be all right. Listen, it should just be okay. We don't need to stop. We don't need to hear that sermon. We don't need to, oh, God forbid, please, we don't need to talk about it. It should just work itself out. Every guy in the room just thought in their minds, amen. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10 says this, whatever, everybody say whatever. Whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. The truth is this, we all desire good marriages. And just like the pesky rattle that we'd rather ignore that tells us that our car needs some work, the truth is we've got to spend some time on our marriage if we want it to work well. So for the next 3 weeks, I want to talk about one small aspect of marriage. We're going to take just one little slice of the pie. And I'm going to keep this bite-sized so you have an opportunity to address this one aspect. And in so doing, you won't be overwhelmed or feel attacked or overloaded. I want to tell you that I've already been working ahead on this. Yesterday, my wife and I were someplace, I don't remember, on our journey back, and I already started on this. And I said to my wife yesterday, I said, this will all make sense tomorrow. But I want you to know that I'm already ahead of the curve. And she said, okay. Okay, if you're new to Shoreline Community Church, inside your bulletin, there's a little white piece of paper, and that's for sermon notes. If you'd like to follow along, we encourage you to do so. You don't have to, but we love it when you do. I also need to stop for just a moment. All I've heard about this week. Now, I lost my phone on Friday. I fell in the water Thursday. fell in the water in Grand Cayman Island. If you got to fall in the water, I got to tell you, falling in the water in Grand Cayman Island is the place that you want to do it. I'm not going to lie, okay? However, I would not recommend doing it with your phone in your pocket. So up to Thursday, I kept hearing how awesome Sarah and Rob Malcolm are and how much you guys don't want me to come home and could they just take over the church. But I want to say publicly thank you, Sarah, so much. And I heard she wasn't feeling very well last week, but soldiered through it. Thank you. And I might just start once a month. You guys could have the other 3 weeks, and I'll do once a month. Sound good? So did you appreciate them the last couple of weeks? Love it when they step in, and just makes me remember how far I have to go as a speaker. They're great. Okay, so in your notes, number 1. If we're honest, we can all agree about this. We all approach marriage with a box full of desires. We all come into our marriage, we all come to marriage with a box of desires, or if you want to call them dreams or wishes, how we think or how we desire our marriage should be. And if you're not married yet, I want to really recommend to you these next couple of weeks. These are going to be great for you. If you're engaged or if you're thinking about being married someday, I would really just encourage you to really listen and think about some of the things I'm going to talk about, especially as we prepare this today and set up the next couple of weeks. But we all come into marriage, we all come into that relationship with a box full of desires. I want you to think about that little box, okay? And we've got those things in there. We'll talk about what they are in just a little bit. But this is how we think or how we want or how we desire marriage to be. So some of these things that we desire, okay? First of all, we desire how decisions are going to be made. We have desires in how decisions are going to be made. If you're a guy, some guys go into it, me man, me make decisions, you follow me, right? Or others say, you know, you kind of desire that your marriage will work out. We'll work it out. We'll make decisions together. We'll sit down and we'll talk about it. We'll discuss, right? And then really probably the most of us, we kind of come into it the third way. We'll find out how to make the decision once we're in the middle of it, right? We'll just kind of figure it out as when we get there. Another desire we have as we come into marriage is how money will be spent, right? We have an idea, we have a desire, we have a plan, or we have thoughts on how money will be spent. To budget or not to budget, right? That's the question. He or she who controls the checkbook controls the world, right? I don't know about you. I think we've written 2 checks in like a year and a half or something. It's all, but he or she who controls the checkbook controls the world, right? Or maybe you come into marriage, you know, I make the decisions. I'm the one who's going to decide on how money is spent. And you come into marriage feeling that way. Or you come into marriage, separate checkbooks. Yay! You know, that's your idea of the perfect marriage. She has her money, I have my money, right? Or maybe you think as you come into marriage, your desire for marriage is that we'll discuss. We'll sit down and we'll plan and we'll have meetings about how money is spent. These are some of the desires. Another part of the desires that we bring into marriage is this. We have an idea of how the perfect marriage, how conflicts, right, are resolved. How conflicts are resolved. Because the truth is, we would like to think that our marriages are never going to have conflicts, but you're going to be in that marriage, so conflict is going to be there, right? You're coming into it, so just plan on it. If you don't think you'll ever have conflict, please come see me for your marriage counseling. We'll help you out with that. It's going to happen. So we think, you know, we all have ideas of how conflict is going to be resolved in marriage, right? We just get everything out on the table, we deal with it, right? And then we get over it. That's like the perfect marriage, right? We just deal with it. Nobody has any hard feelings about it, and we just love each other and we go back as if it never happened. Or we just hold it inside, right? We hold it inside because we need to be sensitive to one another. So I just keep it in. I don't let it out. That's how I deal with conflict. Some people, they come into marriage and they say, you know, it's okay to raise your voice. Yelling's good. It cleans out everything. That's all right. And you come into marriage thinking that's all right. And another person, they'll say, no, you never raise your voice. People who are in love, they talk like this. And they float on love clouds. Right? I don't know. I think it probably looks a little bit more like this. Okay, I turned my head so I couldn't see anybody, doing one of those. That looks like us. So we come into marriage with our ideas of how we're going to resolve conflict. Another way we come into marriage with our desires on the way that our marriage should be scheduled, right? How things are going to work. Some people, they believe that they're going to have the Wally and Beaver there, and they're going to be home. Everybody's going to be home and sitting down at the table at 5:30 every night, right, for dinner. Or maybe it's more like this, and I think as we get busier, it's I'll be home around 7-ish. Maybe something like that, right? And then there's the discretionary time, when you're first married especially, but when you're coming into marriage, you think, we're going to spend all our discretionary time together. We're going to be together all the time. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome, right? Or maybe you came into marriage and you said, well, you know what? I kind of want a little bit of me time. Or time with my friends, right? And you thought coming into marriage, it would still be like, being at the college frat house or something like that, right? And you have that idea, right, of the snow falling outside of your little bungalow on Christmas morning. It's just the two of you. You're on that love cloud, right? And you've given each other really expensive gifts. It's awesome. Or maybe you come into marriage and you say, no, Christmas is at my mom's house with all my aunts and my uncles and cousins and great-grandkids and so on, and right? And everybody's going to be there, and that's what Christmas is going to be like. At the beginning of our marriage, Lori and I, we sat down and we split up the holidays. Went something like this. Lori's family got Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. My family got Halloween, Groundhog Day, Festival of Souls, and a little Shinto holiday in August that you probably never heard of. That was how we split them up. See, those are love eyes over there that I'm getting right now. And you come into marriage, right, and you have all these desires. Everybody say desires. desires, right? Now, the most important desire we have coming into marriage is this: how we desire to be treated by our spouse and then by our children. And we come into marriage and we say something like this: if she really loves me, she will ... If he really loves me, then he's going to. And real love looks like, and she looks like, and he looks like, and it comes together, and and this is the way I desire, everybody say desire. This is the way I desire my marriage to look like. Several things impact, in your notes, several things impact what we desire in marriage. Several things are going to impact what we desire in marriage. First of all, what we've seen in our homes, right? That has a big part of what we desire in marriage, what we've seen in our homes, what we've read in books, right? What we've read in books, what we've heard in sermons, and what we've watched on TV. Let me say those again for you. What we've seen in our homes, what we've read in books, what we've heard in sermons, and what we've watched on TV. But for the most part, in your notes, we are reacting to the homes we grew up in or the marriages we've come out of. That's the reality of it. If you're here, and I'm not asking you to raise your hand or anything like that, but if you've been divorced before, your desires in marriage change, don't they? The first time you go in, it's kind of this utopia. The second time you go into it, it's kind of like, well, I'll settle for this, and I'll compromise, I'll give up a little bit, but I understand, I see things a little bit differently. Depending on the home that you grew up in, it's really going to shape what you think marriage should look like. Lori, my wife, she came from a family that lived in the same area, so they do all holidays together. At some point, they all see each other. They do picnics together. They go on vacations together. I've got first cousins I don't even know. Seriously. I grew up, the closest I've ever lived to my family was 4 hours away. We've never lived that close. Everybody was kind of disjointed, and I have cousins out in Utah. I've never met them in my entire life. I couldn't pick them out of a lineup if I had to. I've never seen them before. More or less had picnics together and spent time together. So I didn't come into marriage with this big expectation of doing holidays together and picnics together with the family and so on and so forth. So I had to change what my desires were. So the homes that we grow up in and the marriages that we come out of have a lot to do with what our desires, I want everybody to say that again, desires in marriage are going to be. Okay? So here's what happens. One of two things is going to happen. We either try to recreate them or we try to do something entirely different. Right? My mom always... Oh, I don't want to do it like that. It's kind of funny. Bud and Becky aren't here, so I can pick on them a little bit. It's really neat to watch. They just celebrated their first anniversary. And so it's kind of neat to watch how they accept some things from us and reject other things, right? There's some things you can just see, like, Bud, I didn't think you hated it that much. I don't ever want to do that there, They're picking and choosing what their marriage is going to look like. And that's all right. It's what they're going to do. It's got to happen, right? And so we do that. We either try to recreate. Isn't it amazing how you have that cookbook, that your mom, and I'm not going to say just ladies anymore because most of the guys cook too, but you have that cookbook with your moms. I love my mom, but my mom has burnt water. I mean, I don't think we ever had anything on our plate that wasn't burnt, right? Except for my mom's roast. So my wife, for years and years and years and years, she figured out how to make my roast like my mom, because I love my mom's roast. You can have just about anything else. My mom's not a good cook. She'll stand up here and tell you she's not a good cook. But I love to roast. So I said, honey, I want mom's roast every so often. So she learned how to do that, right? And everything else, forget about it, because my wife's a much better cook than. But Lori makes all kinds of dishes. Guys, my wife makes quiche. Does your wife make you eat quiche? Stop. I just say every time she makes quiche, I'm like, invite over some of your friends who like quiche and leave me alone. I'll take a burger, right? Now that I'm losing some weight, I'll take a turkey burger. That's fine. Just leave the quiche out. Oh, isn't it so good? No. No matter how many times you make it, it's not good. I don't like it. Now listen. At the center of all of this is I, isn't it? I imagine, I desire. I've always thought that I is at the center of all this. See, the picture that I've given to you right now is designed for me by me. Because I have no other choice but to design how I come into marriage around me. It's I. It's the I in marriage. It's an I marriage. So at the altar, listen, at the altar, you dumped your desire on your spouse. They didn't even realize it was happening. But you don't feel the desires anymore. Listen, here's what happens. They go from being desires. Everybody say desires. They go from being desires now to being expectations. Exactly. And here's what happened. You're standing there. You didn't realize it, and you're smiling. Hi, love you. This is awesome. Yeah, I think so too. Right? Forever. Woo. Little did you know, as that transaction is happening, you're going, I expect. And they're going, I expect. And we're dumping our expectations on one another. Here's what happens. Eventually, if you've been married for more than 3 days, what happens? The eyes collide, don't they? But I always thought, I have expected. I thought you would. I thought she was going to. I thought it would look like this. I thought eventually those eyes collide. Now, when those eyes collide, here's what's going to happen. One of 5 things is going to happen, okay? We're going to react to those eyes colliding in one of 5 ways. The first way is this: we leave. I didn't think it would look like that. I always thought my ideas, my thoughts, my expectations, my desires were that you would, and that you would meet, and that you would make up, and you would fulfill, and you would. I don't need this. I'm done. This is not what I thought marriage would be. We leave, and guess what happens when we leave? We go, I'm out of here, and guess what? I'm taking me with me. We take I with us, right? One of the things people in counseling, a lot of times, they'll say, you know what? When I'm with Betsy, we always get in an argument. And when I'm with Randall, it always seems we end up in an argument. And when I'm with Dave, it always seems like, and I say, you know what the common denominator is? You. Because listen, wherever you are, there you are. And if you keep running into the same thing over and over and over again, there might be an I problem. And so we leave and we take I with us. The second way we react to this, when the eyes collide, is we conquer, right? We try to change our spouse to get her or to get him to be I. I want you to dress this way. I want you to act this way. I want you to talk this way. I want you to cook this way. I want you to clean this way. I want you to spend time with the children this way. I want you to go to work this way. I want you to make this much money so I don't have to, and I want you, I expect. And so we resort to tried and proven techniques, don't we? Things like nagging, yelling, bribing, threatening, all the things our parents used on us. How did that work out for you? So we try to conquer. The next way we can react to our eyes colliding is we conform. We conform. We become somebody we're not. In other words, we're saying, I won't be I'll be him, or I'll be her. See, here's the problem with this. On the surface, everything looks really good, right? They just seem so happy, right? But here's what happens. Eventually, the truth surfaces, and someone is taken completely by surprise. When they go, I don't want to be you. I don't want to be the person you've told me to be. I don't like that. I've never liked that. I didn't want to be here ever. I didn't want to live next door to your mother. Right? That was a little too loud. Randall's like, was that out loud? Hi, Frida. We're glad to have you home, by the way. Preach it. You don't want to live by your mother-in-law? No, don't. Hey, listen. God does not want you to be conformed to the image of your spouse. Okay? Number four. The fourth way we react to when the eyes collide is we attempt to work out a compromise. Let's make a deal, right? And here's the truth about this. This works for a while too, okay? We set up the ground rules and we compromise and it's so good and everything is great and it's chugging along, right? But the problem with compromise is this. Compromise is still about I. The thing about compromise is what we're really saying is I will as long as you. I'll do what you want me to do. I'll compromise. I'll meet in the middle as long as you make sure you're here too. As long as you're compromising too. And what happens is this leads to scorekeeping. And listen, folks, inevitably what happens here is it does not foster intimacy. Most often, compromise alone moves us from a covenant relationship to contract. We do the right things for wrong or for selfish reasons. Compromise stems from a commitment. Listen, compromise stems from a commitment to marriage rather than a commitment to our partner. And this is where things like this come in. Well, you know what? In our marriage, in our family, there's never been a separation. In our marriage, or in our family, there's never been a divorce. It's you know what? You just stick it out, you grind it out, you work. You make it work. And I wonder, where's the intimacy? Where's the love? Because now we've gone from in marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling, we talk about the covenant. A covenant relationship is this. Think of a triangle. Everybody make a triangle. We'll work on this together, okay, real quick, okay? At this triangle, at the base of the triangle is you and your spouse, right? At the top of the triangle is God. And when you make a covenant before God, right, you and your spouse say, we are going to make God the center of our relationship. We're going to make God the center of our lives. And as we are moving closer to God, each of us is moving closer to God. Guess what's happening? Look at your triangle. What's happening? You're getting closer to who? One another, aren't you? You're not only getting closer to God, so when you invite God into a covenant relationship, you're saying God comes first, and listen, we don't have to worry about things like divorce, because if God comes first and we're getting closer to God and we're getting closer to one another, we don't have to worry about these things because we've placed God at the center of marriage, and it's a covenant. And listen, a covenant is unbreakable. Contracts say, if you will, then I will. But as soon as you don't, guess what? I'm no longer responsible to keep my side of the contract. That's what happens in a contract. As soon as someone breaks the terms of that contract, what happens to the contract? It's void, isn't it? And when we come into a compromise in our relationship, we come into a contract that says the moment you break this, the moment you do something that we didn't agree on, well, then you know what? All bets are off. And we forfeit intimacy, and we forfeit love, and we forfeit passion for our partner in order to keep the contract. See, I'm in here because I am doing what I'm supposed to do. Now, there are areas in your marriage where you must deal with initially through compromise, right? I always say, usually the first argument in a relationship is usually something along the lines of, it's the most amazing thing. There's usually a squeezer of toothpaste and a roller. I don't know how we find each other, right? If you're like me and you're a roller from the bottom up, right? I've been married for 25 years now. Guess what I am now? I'm a squeezer. We compromised a couple years ago. I have my own toothpaste, okay? So you got to find a compromise. I don't know whatever happened to the pump. How many of you are old enough to remember the pump? Those were marriage savers, weren't they? Especially the Aquafresh. They had the different colors going around. Come on, is it just me? Yeah. And then all of a sudden they were gone. I'm like, what happened to my world? We had to go to therapy for a while. It was a mess. It's a mess. If I had known they were going to do that, I would have stocked up on them. Somewhere, there's a lot of things. Listen, don't get me wrong. We have to compromise on certain things, right? Another thing we've compromised on, full disclosure, is my wife now loves to take my shoes up to our bedroom because I just love throwing them at the door. I love you, honey. Okay, let's talk about option number 5. You ready? Got your pen? Option number 5 is next week. You got to come back next week if you want 5. If you skip next week, you have to go online or something. And we're going to hold it back for a couple of weeks just to make you suffer. We'll talk about that next week. We're going to deal with option number 5 next week. Okay, so in your notes, number 3. I'm not even giving it to you, so, okay? Just put next week there. Here's what I want to do. I want to frame the problem in a way that will help us understand the solution better. So point number 3 this morning. Listen, when we dump our desires on our spouse and we expect them to be met, we immediately, here's what happens. We create a debt-to-debtor relationship in our marriage. We create a debt-to-debtor relationship. And that's what scorekeeping does, doesn't it? It says, whoa, you owe me. I did, but don't you remember when don't you? I'm going to explain this for you. Ready? First part of this is expectation, okay? We didn't know what expectation is. Expectation, what you owe me or what I deserve or what I assume. That's an expectation. Expectation is what you owe me, what I deserve, or what I assume. Don't you know? Don't you know who I am? I'm your husband, right? You owe me. I moved away from my family, so you owe me. I learned how to make that dish that you like so much, so you owe me. I fix your car, I go to work, you owe me. And when they meet our expectations, what happens? When our spouse meets our expectation, what happens? Nothing, right? They don't get credit for that because after all, that's what they're supposed to do, isn't it? It's an expectation. See, after all, you're my wife. I have an marriage. So when you do what I expect you to do, there's no credit for that. This is why your mortgage company, right, doesn't send you a long perfume-laced letter every month you make your mortgage payment, right? They don't go, oh, wow, we are so grateful you made that mortgage payment. I can't even tell you. You know what? Here's a box of chocolate, right? Anybody have your mortgage company do that? Of course not. Why? Because they expect that you're going to make that payment. That's what you're supposed to do. In your notes, a debt-to-debtor relationship reduces or removes the opportunity for unconditional love. Boy, every single one of us, we went into marriage going, boy, I hope they don't love me unconditionally. I hope they have all kinds of expectations for me. I hope they just love me for what I give them, what I do for them, how I treat them, how I talk to them. And I don't want them to expect anything from me, right? That's how we go into marriage? Of course not. See, the essence of love is I'm going to do for you because I want to, not because I owe you. Expectations remove the margin necessary for love to be recognized and appreciated. Thirdly, here, a marriage of expectation destroys intimacy and romance. A marriage of expectation destroys intimacy and romance. And boy, every single one of us go into marriage not expecting intimacy or romance, don't we? Right? Of course not. Okay, in your notes, meeting someone's expectation gets me to even. I can't ever get ahead, and eventually what happens? I wear out. Eventually, I wear out. Some of you this morning, in your marriages, you feel worn out. I can't ever please him or her. Translation, nothing I do ever satisfies or fulfills their expectations. They always expect more. They always want more. I can't ever get ahead. I'm always at what? Even, or I'm behind. Right? Guys, you expect the house to be clean, right? So, what do you notice? You come home, what do you notice? The one thing that's not clean, right? The one thing that she didn't get to. That's the thing you point out, right? Ladies, what do you expect? You expect him to spend time with the children. Expect him to spend quality time with the kids. And when he does, it's never quite enough. Well, you could have been there earlier. You're 5 minutes or you're 10 minutes, you could have been there. You could have. So the act of love isn't perceived as such. In fact, it registered just below what? Average in your book. Okay, in your notes. Got real quiet in here real fast. Now listen, I want you to catch this. This is important. Behind these expectations are legitimate, God-given desires. Behind these expectations are legitimate, God-given desires. You were born with a desire for respect, to be cherished. You were born with a desire for companionship and acceptance and intimacy and sex and love and to be understood and to be appreciated and to be desired and followed and listened to. These are all God-given desires. So I want to put this up on she already did it. Okay. So we've got all of these things: respected, cherished, companionship, acceptance, intimacy, sex, love, understood, appreciated, desired, followed, listened to. Those are all God-given desires, and they're good. But here's what happens. When I take these desires and I place them on Lori's shoulders, they are no longer desires, they become expectations. I expect now to be respected and cherished, and I expect companionship and acceptance and intimacy and sex and love and to be understood and appreciated and desired. See how that just felt different all of a sudden when it went from a desire to an expectation? Feels different, doesn't it? I took it out of the box of God-given desires, and now I put an I in front of every single one of these. What happens? I should be. I ought to be. You ought to make sure that I am. And it goes to an expectation. It feels like an expectation. And what we're really saying is he or she owes me. And when they give me what I expect, how grateful am I? None. Not at all. I'm not grateful. I expect you to do these things. You're supposed to do that, right? Husbands are supposed to. Wives are supposed to. So, I want to talk to you this morning as we begin to wind this up. How to know when you shifted from a desire to an expectations in your note. Expectations, right? When we move to a desire, we express things with gratitude. With gratitude. Right? We rarely express gratitude for things we have come to expect. Right? If I walked up to you and I gave you $1,000, just handed you $1,000, what would you do? At the very least, you would say, thank you, right? You might even send me a thank you note, or take me out for dinner, or name your first child after me, right? That's gratitude. Do you know why you never say thank you to your spouse for normal things? Because you expect them. You take them for granted. I do too. Listen, okay? I don't ever want to make it sound like I've got these things worked out. I'm preaching at Paul as much, believe me. And when I get home, my wife's going to preach a sermon back at me, okay? This is for all of us. We take them for granted. When you complain about something not getting done, but rarely thank your spouse for when it does, you are operating off of expectations rather than desires. Secondly, acts of service, right? Acts of service. When I see something that needs to be done and do nothing about it, it's because I expect someone else to do it, right? Maybe you do something like this. You say, hey, you have one of your kids come over and you go, hey, listen, tell mom to pick up the clothes in the bedroom, okay? Tell mom she needs to do that, okay? Or maybe it goes something like this at your house. Well, my mom always, right? My mama always, well, go live with your mom, right? Well, my dad, he ain't your daddy, right? You married him to get away from your dad in the first place, so why are you bringing him into the conversation? Quit trying to turn him into him. We have to be careful for those things. So here's what we got to do. We got to pull things out of the expectation box, go ahead, and put them back into the desires. We got to pull things out of the expectation box and place them in the desire box. So how do you keep good God-given desires from becoming harmful, demotivating expectations? How do you take an expectation and put it back into the category of a desire? How do I get I out of the middle of the relationship? Gratitude, right? Being thankful. Making sure that you're doing acts of service. Grabbing that garbage and taking it out. Doing something before your spouse has to do it. Making sure that you're grateful for the fact that they love you and they show you love in different ways instead of it just expecting that it's being done. See, I think many of us walked up to the altar with desires, right? And we walked out the door of the church or out of the chapel with expectations. And listen, to experience what God had in mind, you've got to put some things back in the box where they belong. I'm going to ask the guys to come up. And here's the thing that will keep you from doing that is I. I'm afraid that he or she will. I won't get what I need. I may not be happy. And the problem with I is that I has a lot of expectations or a lot of desires that have become expectations. So, here it is. You have to answer one fundamental question. Write this down in your notes. I didn't put it there. I'm going to give you some scriptures this week, but you have to answer one fundamental question. You ready? What does your spouse owe you? That's your homework for this week. Answer that one question. What does your spouse owe you? Did I put these scriptures in your notes? Are there scriptures at the bottom? Okay, I did these 2 weeks ago, so I can't remember. Okay. And when you're done answering that question, I want you to read these scriptures, and then I want to see if you have the same answer. Would you stand with me this morning? I want you to look at your spouse and say, wow, aren't you glad you're not married to Pastor Paul? The worship team's going to take us out with one song, but I want to leave you with a benediction this morning, and I think it goes well with our message. And then we're going to sing through this one song one time. 1 Peter 4, chapter 4, verses 10 and 11 says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. Do you have the gift of speaking? Then speak as though God himself were speaking through you. Do you have the gift of helping others? Do it with the strength and the energy that God supplies. Then everything you do will bring glory to God through Jesus Christ. All glory and power to him forever and ever. Amen. God bless you. We'll see you next week.